Rule for like 10 years now. He's a great recruiter. And I'll say about Coach Coop before I kind of move on from, is he's always been great to me. I've only had a couple conversations with him, but he's always been super kind to me. He's answered any question I ever had, whether it was at practice or after a coach's clinic. He's been super cool to me, so I hate to see him go. But given the fact that he is gone at this point, I'm actually kind of excited about the John Butler hire. I don't know how much you've had a chance to kind of look into any of his stuff, if any, but I'm not going to go as far to say it was an upgrade like some fans have saying, because I feel like that's a little bit disrespectful to Coop, just considering this guy hasn't coached at all at Nebraska. But right. I will say, given the circumstance, I think this is about as good of a hire as you could have. Do you have any thoughts on kind of the hire that they made?
Yeah, I do. Before I get to him, though, I'd just like to wish Coach Cooper and his family and whatever the personal situation is that caused him to need to leave, I wish them nothing but the best. Prayers up for them. Whatever he's dealing with, I pray it gets handled quickly, that he can get back into what he does best, which is impacting young lives. And that's all I want to say about Coach Coop, because I don't know either. And like you said, and said so very well, anybody out there talking smack or saying that there's some sort of scandal going on behind the scenes or the friggin' sky is falling on the Husker football program, it's not. You know how I know it's not falling is the fact that 13 hours later, somebody had already said, hey, he's got his target.
Yeah.
And the fact that Gary Sharp Saturday morning on the Hail Varsity show in the morning that they do said that he was asked on Thursday why Rule was out looking for a defensive backs coach. So Rule wasn't surprised by this. The only people surprised by this is us.
Yeah, 100%.
And if the response or the reasoning given was personal reasons, can we just leave it at that?
100%.
Anybody on Twitter, anybody that may be listening to this who wants an answer, we don't have one. We're not going to have one until one is provided. Until one is provided, shut the hell up.
Yep, that's what I was about to say. Maybe there is, but we don't know, so shut up.
But as far as John Butler is concerned, and I agree with you, I appreciate your sentiment that it would be a little bit disrespectful to Coach Coop to say that this is an upgrade. Mm-hmm. However, that being said, his resume,
I can't argue with you there. I can't argue with you there.
Especially since 2018, as far as his coaching resume is concerned, I found somebody on Twitter, and I just took a screenshot of it. It's Jim in Minnesota, one of my favorite follows.
Great.
At Huskers MN says, these are Butler's stats since 2018 at Buffalo. First in passing yards per game allowed. In other words, the best in the league. First in passing yards per attempt, first in TDs allowed, first in opponent's passing rating, first in passing first downs, first in average depth per target, second in completion percentage, second in air yards allowed per completion, fifth in yards per catch. The guy has Big Ten conference experience too, being the defensive coordinator at Penn State back in 2013 before Bill O'Neill, was that his name?
O'Brien.
Bill O'Brien took off for Bill O'Neill's a bowler. How good do you get that I know that Bill O'Neill's a bowler. Good one. Bill O'Neill goes to Bill O'Brien goes to Houston to coach Texans, takes John Butler with him. So the guy knows the Big Ten inside and out. He's obviously knows exactly what is necessary to be a good corner or a good defensive back of any kind in the NFL. So does Coach Cooper. The big advantage Coach Cooper has had is the fact that he's been Matt Rule's right-hand man for a long period of time, played for Rule, knows Rule inside and out. John Butler is going to kind of come in. But let me ask you this question, Coach. Mm-hmm. How short of a list does Matt Rule have in his desk for the next guy up for a defensive coordinator if he's going out and he's grabbing a defensive backs coach whose aspirations are to be a defensive coordinator, and he's got him basically hired within 24 hours after Coop leaves? That tells me he knew who Butler was, knew he had identified him, he was ready to go get him and wanted to go get him, and knew what Butler was going to bring to the table just in case he has to find somebody to replace Tony White in the near future. That's how I see it.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. So I hear the next defensive coordinator talk, and I do think resume-wise, that's 100% that would be the guy. The only pushback's not the right word. The only question I raise to him being the next defensive coordinator, and I think that there is a good chance that ends up happening if Tony White does leave. Well, I mean, okay, it's not if. When Tony White leave, we just don't know when that's going to happen, right? He might not, but eventually that's going to happen for him to go be a head coach. The only question that I have is how quickly do we think that Coach Butler ends up picking up the 3-3 defense, not just picking up, but picking it up in a manner to be able to coordinate a defense around that. Because this is just my opinion here, and take this with a grain of salt. But I feel like he would have to change, because when he was at Penn State, and I know this was over 10 years ago, the game has changed quite a bit, but he ran a 4-3 defense, a lot of cover 2 looks, right? Mm-hmm. And if you don't know this, like, that's the exact opposite of Tony White. Tony White runs a 3-3 crazy front. He runs a lot of cover 3, cover 1, completely different concepts. And that's kind of generally what Rule has had at both of his, at Temple and at Baylor, the 3-3 stack, lots of cover 1, cover 3. So, and I'm not saying I would think Butler would have to change his philosophy to be more like that than Coach Rule saying, oh, yeah, we're going to go back to the 4-3. Because to me, I feel like a lot of Rule's success, I mean, just look last season. I know there was some people not even doubting but questioning what that defense would look like. I don't think we can argue that defense was great last season. And I think a part of that played into the scheme that we were running with Tony White's scheme. If you check out the Husker Army podcast, I was just on there, and Nick Henrich was on there. And I asked him kind of like what that transition was like. And he'd said, like, that 3-3 defense has a lot more disguise. Just as a nature, you're a lot more aggressive and athletic because of it, because you're always moving around. Got to be more athletic. Mm-hmm. Tackling has to be really good, or you can't be on the field. So my only, again, not even pushback with Butler being the next DC is, do we think he is going to – and he wants to be a defensive coordinator. That's why he left Buffalo. Do we think that in a year from now, he's going to be in this defense, know it well enough to be the defensive coordinator at Nebraska?
That's a school. Absolutely valid question. And I don't have any pushback for it. Mm-hmm. The one thing I have learned this last season is the fact that the defensive staff that Rule brought in, except for Coach Tony White, were all Rule people, guys that, had come along with them for years. And maybe they probably had some 3-3 experience and all that good stuff. But then as soon as White gets there, boom, it all just seems to come together perfectly. So one thing I know, Tony White knows how to get a guy ready to coach what he wants to coach.
That's a fair
point. Those guys worked so well together. So I'm thinking, number one, I don't have any issues with John Butler coming in and being able to do his job as a DB's coach. No fear whatsoever in that, because apparently,
yes, I'm 1,000% with you on that. I don't want this to come off as me like, throwing shade or questioning him. I'm just throwing it out there as for the future. You know what I'm saying? I'm saying a year from now.
I know what you're saying. I know completely what you're saying. I completely understand what you're saying, and I don't know. I'm not familiar with the Bills' defensive set. I think they were mostly 4-3, or did they run?
They were 4-3 mostly last season, from what I was able to just gather watching.